Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, dear friends of the Monaco Blue Initiative, welcome back to this second session of this 12th edition of the MBI. My name is Jeannie Godula. It is my pleasure to be here with you all day in this beautiful conference room in Monaco's Oceanographic Museum. Alors, un petit mot en français. Sachez que si vous voulez avoir la traduction en français aujourd'hui, c'est possible. Il y a des casques pour les gens dans la salle. À la maison, chez vous aussi, vous pouvez avoir une traduction en français. Pour choisir le français, il faut cliquer sur le petit globe dans le barre d'outils, puis il faut ensuite cliquer « Couper l'audio original » afin de bien entendre la traduction. I was just saying to everyone who doesn't speak French that if you need translations, there are headsets for those here in the house. You can get translation via Zoom to all of you at home as well. Just click on the globe in the toolbar. Now, just one word for those of you in the house. As everything will be on Zoom today at this portion, if you have a hard time hearing, you can get a headset which will help you hear the sound directly if you prefer. Just go ahead and help yourself. Now, just like this morning, for all of you at home, please let me remind you to mute your microphones and turn your cameras off. It just makes things a lot more fluid and more easier if everyone does that. And now, on behalf of all the organizers, Mr. Bernard Foutrier, a plenipotentiary minister and special advisor to His Serene Highness, the Sovereign Prince for Environment, Robert Calcagno, the CEO of the Oceanographic Institute, Prince Albert I of Monaco Foundation, and Olivier Wendin, Vice President of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, I would like to warmly thank you all for being here with us today. A very special thanks as well to all of our moderators, panelists, and particularly our partners, Rolex and Barclays. Thank you for your support of the MBI. Well, earlier today, this morning, Session 1 looked at the role of international negotiations for better ocean governance. This afternoon now, we're focusing on the development of a truly sustainable, fair, and transparent blue economy and how to make that happen from a financial point of view. We're going to hear from some of the different actors in this rapidly expanding sector to try to find out ways to make sure the blue economy grows in a responsible way for the benefit of both ecosystems and people. And given the particular context of the pandemic that we all know at the moment, we'll also hear about how to build back better and smarter. Our second session, coming up in just a minute, will look at how to best integrate ocean issues and SDGs into companies' corporate social responsibility strategy. Our first keynote speech on that issue will be from Virginijus Sinkevičius, the European Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. Our second keynote will come from Dr. Ricardo Serrão Santos, Minister of Maritime Affairs, Portugal. After that, there will be a 40-minute panel discussion that will be moderated by Marie-Claire Daveu, Chief Sustainability Officer and Head of International Institutional Affairs at Kering. There'll also be a 30-minute Q&A where you'll get a chance to take the floor and ask your questions via the Zoom chat. So without further ado, we'll start now with our very first keynote speech. This is from Commissioner Sinkevičius, who joins us now from Brussels. Commissioner, if you're there, we'll leave you the Zoom floor.
Thank you very much. Your Serene Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for organizing this dialogue and for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. As some of you may remember, back in 2015, the EU was among the parties working hard behind the scene to shape and lobby for the Global 2030 Agenda, which has since become the world's blueprint for global sustainable development. 6 years on, the 2030 Agenda has proven its robustness, and I think we are all strongly committed to its delivery, not least in the EU. Under President von der Leyen, the European Commission has adopted the SDGs as a compass and a guidance for its own policies and strategies, in particular the European Green Deal. The Green Deal is our long-term strategy for sustainable growth. It is built on clear ambitions such as carbon neutrality, circular economy, zero pollution, and the restoration of biodiversity. And it has the SDG fingerprints all over it. We announced the Green Deal at the end of 2019, and we are now working our way from the big ambitions to sectoral strategies down to the very practical implementation on the ground. And with every new strategy or action plan, we see the size of this whole operation more clearly. We see how profoundly transformational it actually is. What's also clear from this exercise is that the blue economy will play a major role in this transformation. I even dare to say that we will not meet the European Green Deal ambitions without the blue economy, without the thousands of businesses, investors, innovators, and consumers at or around the sea and coastal areas. We need all of them on board. The question is, and here I am challenging a bit the title of this panel session, whether their involvement and buy-in into the Green Deal and SDG objective is a matter of corporate social responsibility. For me, it's more than that. It is also a common business sense. And let me give you an example. The Jubaca Pomo Pit MPA. The water surrounding Jabuka, a small island in the central Adriatic, are a critical habitat for demersal species, in particular hake and Norway lobster. These commercially interesting stocks have suffered from massive overfishing for decades. In 2017, despite heavy resistance by local fishermen, a fisheries restricted area was established, banning demersal fisheries. Today, fish stocks are recovering much beyond the immediate Jabuka area. Fishermen no longer complain. They report large catches outside of the MPA after years of decline. They abide by the restriction because they can't see the benefits of the MPA as they pull up their fishing nets. This is not just true for fishing, but for every blue economy sector. Coastal tourism, by far the biggest sector in the European blue economy, depends for its very survival on pristine beaches, rich marine biodiversity, and thriving, welcoming coastal communities. Yet the current model, high impact, low value, is cannibalizing on exactly those precious resources. If we have to say one good thing about COVID-19 crisis, it's that these excesses have been exposed very clearly, and that we have the opportunity to reset and do better. So to answer the question of today's panel, I would say by showing the business case behind conservation and sustainable ocean governance, and by being very clear and unambiguous about the long-term direction. That is what we are doing now in Europe with the Green Deal, and this is extremely valuable for companies. When they are considering expensive investments with a payback period of maybe 15 to 20 years, they need to be certain about the returns. So for companies to know that Europe will become climate neutral at the latest by 2050, that should be their cue to start investing in clean renewables. A few months ago, we announced our plans to quintuple our offshore wind energy capacity by 2030 and to increase it 25 times by 2050. Meanwhile, more and more EU countries are showing an interest, sometimes after years of reluctance. Again, this is not about charity. This is about setting the policy framework that makes it easy and rewarding for companies to align with the social, environmental, and development goals we support as society. Besides setting the overall goals, there is also an important role for policymakers in facilitating the good practices you want to promote and bring transparency in the market. Take the example of the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles. Under the excellent auspices of UNEP, these principles now come with a clear guidance, a practical toolkit helping financial institutions to sustainably finance companies in key ocean sectors such as seafood, shipping, ports, tourism, and offshore wind. This is a straightforward way of embedding SDG14 into businesses. On the side of corporate governance, I would like to underline the ambitious work undertaken by Didier Reynders, the European Commissioner for Justice, on a legislative proposal on sustainable corporate governance. This initiative also aims to better align the interests of companies, their stakeholders, shareholders, managers, and society, to help companies embed sustainability in their own operations and value chains. Other EU initiative worth mentioning for the European Marine Observation and Data Network and Copernicus Marine is to make in situ and satellite marine observation results openly available to all. The idea behind it is that a successful and sustainable blue economy can only be founded on comprehensive knowledge of the ocean environment and of how human activities influence marine ecosystems. Over the course of the coming weeks and months, we have several new policy communications lined up that will relate to sustainable aquaculture or algae production, ocean observation, zero pollution, or the blue economy in general. For each of those sectors or subsectors, we are exploring their potential to support the sustainable development of the European economy and society in line with the SDGs and with the Green Deal. And we aim at tackling any barriers this development could face. But again, whether we will meet the goals will not just depend on us, policymakers. It will first and foremost depend on the private world, on businesses, scientists, consumers. We can set the scene. We can provide support. We can get rid of the barriers, but they have to make it happen. We all have a role to play, and only together we will be successful. Let me thank you for your attention and wish you a very productive meeting.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you very much for sharing those words with us from Brussels. We will now hear from our next keynote speaker, also in Brussels. This is Ricardo Serrão Santos, the Portuguese Minister of Maritime Affairs.
Thank you very much. Dear Virginijus, Commissioner, dear colleagues and friends. It is a pleasure and an honor to participate at this 12th edition of the Monaco Blue Initiative under the auspice of His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, and with so distinguished participants. Unfortunately, the times we are living constrain the opportunity for us to meet face-to-face, to share the same physical space as we did in past Monaco's initiatives, Blue Monaco initiatives. It's a fate of our times. The pandemic situation should be a wake-up call for the way we share our common planet, our common ocean, our common spaces. The virus, while shutting us down, made us alert to our vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities of the others. The pandemic is also a wake-up call for the need to change our interaction with nature and the ecosystems around us. More than ever, the way the current pandemic hit families' income and jobs has highlighted the need for effective and sustainable social responsibilities. In a world that is experiencing a post-COVID-19 economic recovery, the reorientation of conventional financial towards more sustainable developed pathways is needed to achieve positive change. International and domestic laws alone are insufficient to resolve the many problems of sustainable development, and the ocean component is one of the most complex. The private sector has the opportunity, through the principles of corporate social responsibility, to support this paradigm change. In recent years, an increased number of companies have included aspects of corporate social responsibility in their objectives, and more companies consider the 70 Sustainable Development Goals to be an integral part of their competitiveness and growth strategy. And this aim has to be taken as a serious commitment, not a window dressing. Our common space has dissimilar and contrasting levels of development, not only inside each country or nation, but also between regions and countries. And the most in risk of deterioration of environmental conditions are the poor and least developed states. However, they have been the least to contribute to the new state of our common ocean. And the progress towards sustainable development has all to do with ending hunger and poverty, but also reducing development asymmetries in the world. The United Nations 2030 agenda, and particularly the SDG14, cannot be achieved on a business as usual strategy or trajectory. Being socially responsible means not only fulfill legal expectations, but also going beyond compliance and investing more into human capital, the environment, and the relations with stakeholders. The investment in environmentally responsible technologies and business practices suggests that going beyond legal compliance may contribute to a company competitiveness, but it is also a moral obligation. And blue business, I particularly like to incorporate elements of social responsibility. The oceans all answers and tools to some of the most pressing challenges of our societies, like climate change and food security, but also health and wealth. The European Union is committed with a new development model, and the blue business sectors have a huge responsibility in the next coming years in the achievement of this objective. Europe aims to become the first climate neutral continent by 2017, as Commissioner Sinkevičius just referred. The EU Green Deal will not only take us to cut down the CO2 emissions, but will also create new jobs. Will improve quality of life by investing in clean energy, expand emissions trading schemes, and reinforce circular economy and maintain biodiversity. I am confident that we will win the battles in front of us. Portugal is in the course to initiate the third national strategy of the ocean 2021-2030 with the vision to foster the blue economy within the framework of a healthy ocean and keep it sustainable by scientific knowledge. That strategy was tailored in view of the transformations envisaged within the United Nations Agenda 2030 on Sustainable Development, the United Nations Decades of Ocean Science and Ecosystem Restoration, the EU Green Deal and its set of strategic missions included the new EU Starfish mission on healthy ocean seas, coastal and inland waters. The proposals that emerged from the high-level panel of sustainable economy, of which the Prime Minister of Portugal is integrated part. At this time, that a virus pandemic has temporarily halted economic activity in the ocean economy, causing losses of income and jobs, a key objective of the huge recovery from the contraction of COVID-19 will be to restore economic activity without simply restoring old patterns of environmental degradation, creating instead a more sustainable and resilient future as is proposed in the transformations paper of the high-level panel of sustainable economy. And in conclusions, I would like to salute the voice and leadership of His Serene Highness, Prince Alberto II of Monaco, his Blue Monaco initiative, and this federative agenda for the protection of the global ocean, recalling what he said very recently about the need to include oceans issues in all our concerns and duties. And I finish citation. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure always to be with you.
Thank you so much to you. Thank you so much, Ricardo Santos, the Minister of Maritime Affairs for Portugal. All right, we'll now go deeper into the theme of the blue economy with the first of our two panel discussions this afternoon. This one is called How to Integrate Ocean Issues and SDGs, in particular SDG14, into companies' corporate social responsibility strategy. Our moderator for this session is Marie-Claire Daveu, the Chief Sustainability Officer and Head of International Institutional Affairs at Kering. Our distinguished panelists are Thomas Thune Andersen, Chairman of the Board of Directors, Ørsted; Daniela Fernandez, Founder and CEO, Sustainable Ocean Alliance; Clément, Co-Founder and CEO, Innovafeed; Adrian Portafaix, Partner, Associate Director, Sustainability, Boston Consulting Group; and Bruno Montefiore, Edinburgh Ocean Leader, Executive Director, Conservamos por Naturaleza. He's also the Director of Marine Governance at the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law. Let's take a look at them all now. If they're there, do we have all of our panelists? Yes, they are. Hello, everyone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's almost everyone. That's all right. We'll get everyone else up there in a minute. Here we go. All right, hello. So before I give the floor to Marie-Claire, I just want to remind all of our participants that we will be taking questions again at the end of this panel discussion. In the meantime, please keep your microphones muted and your camera off. If you want to send in your questions via the chat, you can do that during the panel. That's absolutely fine. And with that, Marie-Claire, I'll say the floor is yours for the next 40 minutes.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for organizing this conversation and for giving me the opportunity to moderate the panel with so distinguished people. During this panel, we will have the chance to listen and to learn from people who are living blue economy in a sustainable way and want to help the world to implement a journey on this by sharing concrete and operational solutions. So let's move for a first and common question to our panelists. From your experience, what are the main challenges related to islanding business development with the protection and sustainable use of the ocean? And finally, the transition to a true sustainable blue economy. How can we act concretely in 2021 and beyond to address this challenge? So we have to start by someone. So would you like to start, Adrian, to be the first to answer this question?
Of course, thank you, Marie-Claire, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, look, I think on the question of the key challenge, I think from my experience working with various corporates across different sectors, the biggest challenge that we see everywhere is it is very hard for businesses to set meaningful company-level targets and to measure progress towards those targets so that companies can have roadmaps to contribute their fair share to protecting and restoring marine ecosystems. Now, before I get a little bit more into this, I wanted to reemphasize a few things that were said about the significant sort of contribution of marine ecosystems to our economy and how they're a great source of innovation and business opportunities. As you might know, we have a few years back published reports together with WWF looking at the economic value, and we realized that the blue economy was worth $2.5 trillion, and that was similar to G7 economies such as France or the UK. And we assessed the value of the natural assets that are creating that value. So we're talking about things like fish stocks, seagrass, coral reefs. And we estimated that in a conservative way, the value of those assets was at least $24 trillion, which is absolutely enormous, astounding. They're creating value for very obvious sectors like fisheries, maritime transport, coastal tourism, but increasingly they're creating value for other sectors as well, such as cosmetics and biopharma and agriculture, biofuels. So, you know, there's a lot of new value creating solutions, some of which are part of the solution to all of our environmental and social problems that are coming from the sea. In fact, we know that 99% of biological resources globally come from the oceans. So, you know, there is a lot of untapped opportunities for innovation in there. Unfortunately, a lot of the value creation so far has come through the destruction or unsustainable exploitation of ocean resources. We're sort of killing the golden goose in a way. And I think that's coming back to the targets. That's largely because while it's really hard, and we discussed it this morning at the jurisdictional level to manage ocean resources in a sustainable way, it's to a certain extent even harder for the private sector. There's hardly any way, any simple way for individual companies to understand their impact and set meaningful targets. So I think SDGs are, you know, as was mentioned right before by the commissioner and the minister, you know, very important roadmap for the world, but they were essentially designed for nations, for countries. And it's sometimes difficult for companies to understand how they fit in there, you know, how they contribute to that. That's particularly true of SDG14, the one that focuses on life underwater. It's actually the SDG that is the least prioritized and tackled by large companies worldwide. Of any SDGs, it's the least mentioned, the least prioritized. Recently, there's been a number of initiatives to start helping companies tackle the SDGs. There's the UN Global Compact, for example. There is recently SBTN, Science-Based Targets Network, that has come up with initial guidance for corporates to set the right kinds of targets on nature, including on the blue economy and on marine ecosystems. And recently, we at BCG, together with Fondation de la Mer and the Ministry of Environment of France, have developed a tool called SDG14 Corporate Dashboard, which intends to help companies look at their holistic impact on oceans so that they can start working on that impact and improving it. We've worked with many corporates and scientists and NGOs to develop it. It looks at very sort of concrete drivers. It looks at all the different pressures and how do they materialize for different sectors. For example, we have plastic leakage, and we have pollution of products that cause eutrophication, air pollution, light pollution, sound pollution, all kinds of types of impacts that companies are having. And we sort of match which of these impacts are relevant for what industries. And then if it's relevant, then what are the levers that you can activate to improve your impact? And what are the KPIs for each of these levers that you can start tracking? Anyways, we hope that this tool, along with other tools like SBTN or the guidance from the UN Global Compact, will help companies seize this huge opportunities, because we think it's more an opportunity than a risk, and that we will have the private sector increasingly act as a positive force for ocean ecosystems moving forward.
Thank you, Adrian, for sharing, I will say, the framework with key facts and figures. I think it's very important for everyone to be able to understand really these key facts and figures. Please, Thomas, do you agree to continue and to be the second one to elaborate on the two questions?
Thank you. And yes, I'll be delighted and very inspirational. I will just start by saying, from a total macro level, we really have a burning platform, because I think where we are with the oceans today is at such a tipping point that it is not a question of spending a lot of time now finding out a lot of things we can do, because if the balance in the oceans break, it will kind of have an impact on the whole world. So I think businesses and everyone else needs to understand that we really are at a burning platform. But then let's take it from there. And then I want to, of course, zoom in and on some of the practical things that can be done. But in order to kind of frame that, I think it's important to come from a little bit outside in on that one. And I'm involved very much in the energy transformation. So it's very much, we are the world's largest offshore wind operator and so forth. So we believe it can be done. We believe that the potential on the oceans is up to 20-30% of the total energy consumption in the world. Should be our aspiration that can come from the oceans. That, of course, has to happen in a balance with nature and making sure that we kind of give back what we also, in a way, take. But the facts are that we believe that there is a volume and there is relevance. Fact is that it has a disruption. We can't be blind to that. So we acknowledge that it has an impact and we need to deal with that. I also think we need to realize that we are only just begun using the oceans. For a long time, we have been fishing, that's correct. And we have been using the oceans for transport, yes. But all the other aspects, the aquaculture, we have only just started. Big infrastructure issues, building islands and so on have only just started. Recreation globally using oceans have only just started. So we're actually only just beginning. So it's now that we need to make sure that we make the framework. But it also shows that the things we do in the oceans, and I also as a previous speaker was talking about, is that there is a real return on that. One of the ways we're looking at it, that $1 saved on the decarbonization using offshore winds actually has a a knock-on effect of about $5 in saved many other things. So it is worthwhile to do. What is today's problem? I think today's problem is that a lot of the things that have been done today has still been very local and nearly always within one particular geography, one particular nation. In order to achieve what we want to do, it's across borders, it's across nations, so it becomes a multi-national, international, global issue. We are still very mature, that's one problem. They're still lacking global regulation. They're still lacking standards, as you were also alluding to. But the technology is there to do a lot of these things. So it's not really a technology issue, but it is very much an issue about having controls and systems and measurements in place. So from a company point of view, what is it that we can do? And I think a company needs to look at this both from a macro level and from an internal level. And the macro level is that companies have to engage and probably make some choices about where they want to have a voice on the international initiatives. One initiative, of course, is the UN Global Compact, sustainable oceans, et cetera, et cetera. I think for many companies, that would be a really relevant place to be. There's the whole activity around marine spatial planning with all the different subcomponents that comes into that. But these are examples of where companies need to engage in the macro initiatives. And they need to do that even though they might not see a return in the next few hours or the next few days, but it is to give the support too, because there has been a breakdown in the trust in international organizations, and we need to give that back. If you then look internally, as my last point here, then companies need to look at the SDGs or whatever, but they really need to articulate, and I think it can be done at a board level with management on what are the unique things one particular company can contribute to the ocean economy. Some people are not really aware that they have an impact on oceans, but it's actually not that difficult if they stop up and start thinking about it. Other companies like ours, yet we are in the ocean. So for us, it is absolutely obvious that our two top SDGs, one is the energy transformation and the other one is life in the oceans or below the oceans. So that becomes an integral part of what we talk about. And we simply do it quite simply. We make a 2x2 matrix. We take all the services, all the products we do, and we try just to map them against the relevance and the impact it has against these SDGs. There's so much we don't know yet, but by just having sufficient focus, we begin to get young people in the organization, exporters, importers, whatever, full of ideas. We get management, we get bottom up, and we get top down ideas and initiatives. So I think the challenge here is that we do not try and go to the nth degree of making a decision. Here we just need to jump out, where the water is deep, and just experiment and get on with things, because from there we will start seeing real results. And what we have been engaged in, and I'll stop on that one, is practical things. We are looking at offshore wind farms. We are talking to fishermen about how we can make sustained fishery within it, how we can make fish farming and so on, if that is what's chosen. In other areas, we look at simply preserving the area so that we are responsible for making sure that nothing else happens in that area, so that there can be a total natural replenishment, or we get involved in constructing reefs or other things that can help the diversity revert. And one of the most exciting projects is on seaweed, simply make seaweed farming there so that the wind farm gets designed so it is easier with the machinery that needs to deal with those things. So it is this about holding hands and going across and making sure that we do not sit in isolation. And it does mean that our remuneration and our returns have to factor this in. It has to be so that when we go to our shareholders, we will talk about a financial return, but we will also talk about a value return. And for me, the value return is diversity of oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So I keep you in mind after your speech description. to act, and also that we have technical solutions. So very interesting. Thank you for that. Daniela, as the founder and CCO of Sustainable Ocean Alliance, how do you react? What you can bring to this conversation about your point of view?
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. I'm thrilled to be with you, although wishing I was in Monaco in person, but Zoom has saved all of our lives, so I'm thankful to be here. I would say, first of all, probably the largest hurdle is truly integrating sustainability practices in every aspect of the business. Instead of simply creating impact through a silo, such as a marketing or CSR department, we need to figure out a way to integrate sustainability into a holistic way so that it impacts the core of the business, from its model to its supply chain, and all the way to holding partners, investors, and even potential customers accountable to the values, principles, and goals of the organization or corporation. And that's something that isn't being talked about. We're thinking about the corporation looking within, but the impact they have in touching so many other stakeholders is something that needs to be thought about. So that would be my number one point. Number two, I would say that the hurdle is around accelerating and adopting innovation. At Sustainable Ocean Alliance, we work with many ocean startups, many ocean entrepreneurs, and the feedback we've heard is that it's very challenging to work with corporations. We work with companies that are building solutions to integrate a circular economy, to collect ocean data, to help corporates reach carbon neutrality. But oftentimes they have a lot of hurdles in truly integrating and finding a clear pathway on how to partner, how to work with these global corporations. So thinking a little bit about how to make those relationships and how to make that connectivity come to life will be really important. And third, I will say that it's also about achieving alignment from the top to bottom or bottom to top. When sustainable development goals become simply a checkbox at a corporation, that's when we're in trouble. It has to be a holistic thinking, and it has to be built into the strategy, incorporated into the framework of how a company operates. And that's when we'll have true buy-in from millennials coming into work, with the corporation, from the people that are actually on the ground integrating and implementing this work. You cannot set targets in sustainability without having true buy-in, without listening to new ideas, and without trying to figure out how we can take that transition, not just as, again, a checkbox for CSR, but rather as a true model that will challenge internal leadership, but also external stakeholders.
Thank you. So you challenge a business model. So, and to avoid that, I will say people speak, but don't act. So I'm sure now that with Clément, we will have many ideas, and we will combine innovation, perhaps disruptive innovation, with blue economy. So Clément, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Very nice to be part of this panel. First, I believe that one of the main challenges we have is that we don't see that we are not always able to show that preservation of ocean and business development is actually the very same objective in the midterm. As Adrian explained, ocean is not only a source of wonder, but also a huge economic asset, and we need to preserve it. Only two examples of the value brought, economic value brought by the ocean. First, it delays global warming by absorbing 30% of the CO2 and 93% of the added heat each year. It also feeds the world by providing more than 3 billion people, more than 20% of the animal protein intake each day. So what should be done to, at the same time, protect the oceans and protect this economic asset? First of all, I believe we need to carry on investing in building a very strong basis of facts, frameworks that explain what are the mechanisms, what are the risks, what is at stake, in order to disseminate this knowledge and clarify what is at stake. Once we have these frameworks, this basis of fact, then we need solutions. And many solutions will come from innovation. I will just deep dive on one example, but they will have many others, aquaculture. 50 years ago, 95% of the seafood was coming directly from the ocean. Today, more than 50% of the seafood is produced by aquaculture, which has a great impact on lowering the pressure on the marine biodiversity, and also providing low carbon footprint animal protein to the world. Today, we need more innovation to make aquaculture even more sustainable. And one key topic is the feed we use in aquaculture, which represents 80% of the carbon footprint of aquaculture. We still also rely for aquaculture on marine resources through fish oil and fish meal, which represent 20% of the global catch. And I do believe that innovation and new technologies can have solutions to these issues. We have alternative ingredients, alternative protein that can replace in the future part of this fish meal, and insect proteins, the resource that we are developing at Innovafeed, is one of these solutions.
Thank you so much, Clément, for this insight. So to pay attention to the time, I will let Bruno to end the first round of questions. Bruno, please.
Thank you so much to everyone. I'm feeling incredibly humbled to be in this panel. And I'm going to use also the words that Daniela has already mentioned. They really resonated with me. So I'm gonna jump a little bit into some of the concrete examples that holistic view can take place when working with corporations. I have been working in an NGO for the past 15 years, and we have created partnerships with over 150 corporate companies. So some of the learnings that I wanted to share with you, some of our insights of how do we create this strategic vision in corporate business, is that often in some of the companies, the corporate social responsibility is allocated to the marketing department. And this is something that struck me in the beginning when I was speaking to them. And what I learned from these examples is that the main impact that is created by corporate business is when it's actually something that is embraced at the higher levels of the company. It has to be something that it's part of the identity. It has to be part of the purpose of the company. And it also has to be a long-term commitment. When it depends on the marketing department, what happens is that they have a funding allocated each year, and they want to do something interesting that attracts attention, but that usually changes every year. And processes regarding the marine environment require a long-standing commitment. So I think that one of the first things of understanding this holistic approach is committing to these long-term strategies and making it part of the identity. If you give purpose to the members of the company, you're going to feel motivation. What we have a lot in NGOs is a purpose, and we get a lot of people, we get volunteers, we get a community. So I think there's something that in that alliance between NGOs, foundations, and corporate social responsibility teams at businesses, that's one of the main things that can be worked. The second thing that I also wanted to mention was that right now that we're focusing on the 2030 agenda, and there's a lot of efforts being directed towards the creation of new marine protected areas, I think it is really important to acknowledge that for every business that wants to put $1 for a new marine protected area, I will suggest them to put $1 for an existing marine protected area. Because what is happening in countries like Peru is that there's so much interest on new marine protected areas, but if the government itself sees that the existing marine protected areas are not effectively being managed, then it's not creating the best precedent for this new marine protected area. So that's something that I will really suggest companies that are wanting to invest in marine protected areas. And finally, like as an example, I know that in Europe, they're not so big in terms of the movement, but in America and South America, the B Corps movement, it's something that has gained a lot of track, and having them as part of, like having purpose as part of this movement, it's something that has been really useful to create an ecosystem where where they really create collaboration across the sector. One of the companies that has helped a lot to us has been Patagonia. And one of the things I really liked from them during the pandemic was that they have this platform called 1% for the Planet, where they allow businesses to donate a percentage of their income to NGOs that work on social and environmental issues. And they were one of the first that came across and said, in these difficult times for everyone, do not cut on this 1% for the planet. They were trying to make sure that the trade-off that comes when you have to negotiate economic gains versus environmental standards was not being lost because of the crisis. And I think that's something that we should also like continue to embrace as part of the goals of any corporate social responsibility strategy in business. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing all of this. I think your insights are really very powerful, and I'm sure they resonate with our audience. When I see on the chat the number of messages, I can tell you that everyone keep in mind that during the Q&A session, they will be able to ask you more details. So be ready for the Q&A session. So now we can move to the second questions. How can success stories be scaled up at the pace needed? Because we know that there is an emergency. But of course, without creating new challenges for marine ecosystem and biodiversity. One question. And finally, because I think what we need to be, it's really to be operational. If you were to formulate a kind of key takeaway, key message from this panel discussion, what would that be? In 30 seconds, please, because it's important to stick to the time. So I will take the same order because I think that it was great. So Adrian, if you want to start.
Of course, sure, thank you. I think I really liked, a lot of the panelists referred to how companies need to truly transform, their business models to have true impact at scale. I think I'd like to highlight that if we want to bring this to the right level, we need to think beyond the sectors that are labeled as maritime sectors. We need all of the sectors of our economy to realize, as was mentioned, that they have some impact and some they're putting some pressure, and they might have some solutions for ocean ecosystems. So, it's a message that is valid for, say, people who do maritime transports, but it's also valid for people who do fashion or health products. It's also not necessarily something that's on top of what people are already doing, right? Ocean ecosystems, as we discussed, are related to what people are doing about greenhouse gas emissions. It's related to what people are doing about social topics as well, because of communities on the coastlines. So it's not mutually exclusive. It's something that is sort of bringing together a number of things that company already working on. And finally, it's not clashing with financial performance. It's typically something that we see again and again is actually converging or reinforcing financial performance of companies, because it's reducing risks, it's reducing costs, it's helping you think of long-term innovation opportunities, long-term sales opportunities that are good for businesses. We see again and again that businesses are more resilient when they are strong on social and environmental topics. Investors want it, customers want it, employees or potential employees and recruits want it. And that will all help them to build strong business assets and a strong position in the market. In fact, what would be fantastic is if in each sector there was a leading player or a few players who really decided to position as shapers in this ocean topic, right, on SDG14. What I mean by shapers is people who come and influence the way we think about it, the way that their industry has a role to play. And that will be win-win-win for them, right? It will be win for the company because people will take notice and value that effort. There'll be win-win for the whole sector that will transform to become more resilient in the coming years. as this becomes a license to operate topic, and it will be win for people and for the planet. So I think we need to bring this at scale to have big leaders in each sector who dare to become shapers and change the rules of the game on how we leverage and take care of ocean ecosystems.
Thank you, Adrian. Without any transition, Thomas?
Thank you very much, and some inspirational comments all around. If I may, I will kind of segue from what Daniela was saying and also what Adrian was saying, and it is around back to the purpose. And I think the issue here is, you can define purpose in many different ways, but I think if a company sits down and thinks about what is a challenge we want to solve, and that becomes your purpose, then from there flows a lot of things, and it's the same with the NGOs and so on. But companies are still not, they're still the focus. The purpose is still too much of the earning money rather than it is we want to, as we do in Ørsted, we believe in a world that runs entirely on green energy. So that drives everything we do, and that drives the conversation we have with shareholders, and that drives the way that we can look at our returns, and it drives the fact that we present to them two things. We present to them a balance sheet, and we present to them a value sheet. And we are only beginning to see that happening. And my challenge to a lot of the financial institutions are that they are beginning to be there. They have talked this a lot, but they still, to AGMs and so on, they have a tendency to send the governance person who starts complaining about that somebody did something wrong and there's somebody who has been sitting for too long, rather than really embracing it. But I believe we are getting to the crossroad where that is happening. Then I like to address and challenge the word of using the CSR. It's a little bit back to the comment about that you can't have this in a marketing department. And I think the CSR, as I provocatively like to say, is what companies does to pay for a bad conscience. But the companies need to move away from that to find out, how can a company proactively use its strength to make the changes? And that can be because it is a fashion company that wants to transport things on the oceans, but they do insist that the ships are sailing with CO2-free engines, which is something of the future, but it is the technology is there to do it. So we really need to make sure that we have this discussion around scope 1 and 2, which is what the company itself can do. And scope 3 is what the company can insist that others are doing by the supply chain. But that has a cost, maybe a cost associated short term, but it would have a value, a long-term value on that. So it is this ability to start shifting between a balance sheet and a value sheet. And we need to be better at articulating that. And then the last comment I have is the question, the challenge about putting money into existing projects, which I think is exciting. But there is two different things coming into play, because there's a lot of the nature-based things, which would be to put money into that. And then there are the things that a company can do ourselves. I'm lucky to chair a company where we have set out as a goal that we will repay our CO2. We won't just say that we be CO2 neutral. No, we have to repay what we have sent out. So on our 100-year birthday, we will have repaid all the CO2 we have been using for the 100 years. But the latter part we can only do by looking at nature-based initiatives. So the strength and the robustness where the NGOs can help us to make sure that the investment in these existing projects or new projects, that they are for real, because otherwise it becomes blue washing or greenwashing or whatever. I'll stop here before I get too engaged.
Thank you, Thomas. Daniela, so to scale up and your key takeaway.
Absolutely. So to answer this question and to provide context, I'm going to be using examples from a survey that we recently received from our community. So in addition to supporting ocean technology entrepreneurs, we also have the largest network of young people globally. We have young people in 165 countries working on ocean solutions on the ground. And so when we ask them what are the most concerning issues at hand, what are the challenges that they face with corporations, with governments, with entities, I'm going to be answering on behalf of thousands of young people globally as I give this response. So first of all, I would say that we have to make sure that we set short-term goals and milestones that hold current leadership accountable, right? Oftentimes we're seeing corporations set these lofty 10 to 20-year goals that are being announced by leaders that may not even be in power by the given time frame. And that sense of urgency is something that the next generation is really craving and really hoping to see leadership from corporations. So that's point number one. Point number two is thinking about open sourcing sustainability practices. Companies need to be transparent and open about the successes and the failures they face, because in this world we're living in, we are not going to be successful, and we cannot drastically achieve these challenges if we don't open source these ideas, if we don't talk about what's happening, because these are very complex issues that we need different corporations to set forth their best practices and have it be compatible instead of competitive. So that's my second point. And my third point is also thinking about interdisciplinary teams working on these challenges. Oftentimes we think about needing scientists and researchers as the only people that have answers to these problems, but that's not the case. We need to think about people that are, like we talked about in creativity, talents, people that are, marine biologists, people that have different skill sets, and open sourcing these abilities to bring challenges and bring innovation inwards instead of only thinking about R&D departments that our corporations are building. So how can we integrate existing startups, existing entrepreneurs into corporations, as opposed to simply thinking that these problems will be solved within a corporate strategy? So those would be the three takeaways around urgency, making sure we bring innovation into this space, and also being transparent about successes and failures.
Thank you, Daniela. Very ambitious. Clément?
Well, this question of scale is absolutely critical, because without scale, no impact. And on this point, allow me to share the Innovafeed example. What we do at Innovafeed is to bring back insect in the food system with the ambition to make it more sustainable. We recycle waste, co-products, and that we bring back nutrients in the food chain to feed fish, small mammals, or small birds that naturally eat insects. This idea is not new, but what is new is a pioneering scale at which we are able to do it. We have opened last year the world's largest insect protein in north of France, and we will produce 100,000 tons of insect ingredients, saving 57,000 tons of carbon footprint, of CO2 emission, and saving 50,000 tons of forage fish. So in my mind, I believe that what has enabled us to scale up has been two things. First, a very clear and very strong investment in technology. And second, the partnerships that we have been able to develop with the value chain. Regarding the investment on technology, it boils down to building a very strong team. Today, out of 150 people working at Innovafeed, we have more than 100 people working on technology development, on robotics, automation, data management, in order to bring competitivity and performance in what we are doing. And regarding the partnerships that you need to develop with the global leaders of agro-industrial systems, you need to develop value-created business model with your player downstream and upstream your business. We are working, for instance, with players like ADM or Tereos to recycle their co-products. And we are also working with clients and retailers to invest on R&D and build the marketing story of our solution. And I really believe that these two aspects, investment in technology And partnership along the value chain can be as a critical elements to scale up. And then to conclude, I do believe that we need to build more projects with purpose. We need to build organization with values. We need to hire the best people within this organization to focus these people in developing technologies, meaningful technologies. And I'm pretty confident that by doing so, we'll be proud of what we will have achieved in 10 years from now.
Thank you, Clément. So before having the Q&A session, Bruno, could you share your own insight and thoughts on this?
Of course. Well, in my experience, scaling up initiatives, I invest in people. So I love the idea of Adrian about shapers, also because I was part of the Global Shapers community from the World Economic Forum, and I can see what that kind of collaboration between young people across the world can create. But the second one is about drive. Like any process needs drive, needs motivation. So I love when Thomas was talking about, don't get me so engaged. I can see you have that purpose, no? So we need to inspire everyone to have that same level of engagement. And in my own experience, what gets me inspired and motivated to continue working for the oceans is the fact that I have these really close experiences with nature in the ocean. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was in my surfboard and I was surfing and there were like 10 dolphins next to me. That experience fueled me for 10 years more of working for the oceans. And I live in a city where I live with other 10 million people in Lima. This is one of the mega cities in the world. And the experience that I had was just a couple of kilometers away from my house. So based on that specific example, I want to talk about the importance of creating a concept called blue spaces. Like the World Health Organization has this concept, which is green spaces. And we need to have like 9 square meters of green spaces per inhabitant in the planet. But we don't have the same concept for blue spaces. Maybe we should also have the same kind of indicators where we have some established intangible parks close to the coastal cities where people can have this positive experience with nature. I think that will be something that if we push it globally, like to have like intangible areas for recreation, not because of their importance for biodiversity, but just because of the public use, that can create a really interesting change. And I, as an environmental lawyer, I really believe in the power of policies and legislation to drive systemic change. One of the things we did in Peru was passing this law to protect surf breaks, to protect surf breaks for recreation. And now that the law is in place, we only need $5,000 to protect each surf break. So instead of having to create a lot of effort for protecting each site, the fact of having a law allows us to be much more, create a larger impact from a systemic view. My quote would be the same that we use for our organization, which is, it's our motto, it's leave every place that you visit better than you find it. Just simple as that, just create a positive impact. Thank you.
Wonderful to end this I will say, session on the panel. So thank you so much to all of you for this really great conversation. So now it will be the time of the Q&A session. I leave the floor to the room in Monaco, but I see that on the chat, we have so many questions, so we can keep at least 1 hour in addition.
Exactly. Thank you, Marie-Claire. We could talk for an hour. Unfortunately, we just have 20 minutes. Let me just briefly ask, does anyone in the room have a question? Yes, Mr. Calcaño.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. I must say that I am very pleased that such a strong and powerful workshop did happen in that 12th session of the Monaco Blue Initiative. I must confess that when we created the Monaco Blue Initiative 12 years ago to offer an annual platform where top leaders, top political, top science, and top NGO leaders could discuss, it was in our intention to invite entrepreneurs and large corporations to join that discussion. For the first 4 or 5 years, it was quite difficult to get their interest. And today, I'm really very happy that we were able to organize and to have such a powerful discussion. I am very pleased that we were able to gather together and a very large energy transformation company. Thank you very much, Ørsted, an accelerator, some startup, and the protein insect transformation. But I'm also very pleased that our moderator, Marie-Claire Daveu, accept to moderate this workshop. When about 3 or 4 weeks ago I invited her to moderate, I was not convinced that she will accept, because Kering is a very strong and very global company, but it's a galaxy of luxury brands and maybe a little bit far from the ocean. So I was really very happy that you accept, and I would like to ask you the question, what Kering is doing for protecting the ocean, for developing its CSR regarding the SDG14 and others. Thank you, Marie-Claire.
Marie-Claire, a question for you.
Thank you. Sorry for the other panelists. I didn't know that the question will be for me. It's not so classical. But what I would like to say in a nutshell, at the level of Kering, and as you mentioned, we are a luxury company where biodiversity, raw materials are really key to make, I will say, our beautiful products from Gucci side until Boucheron side. So through also the fashion pack, to give you a concrete example, we try, for example, to remove all the single-use plastic. We try really for each raw materials to have environmental criteria and also social criteria, because you mentioned it, Adrian, it's also important not to forget the social side if we want really to have an impact on the environmental side. So without having the time to go into details, what is the most important for us to share with you, we put a few years ago now sustainability at the heart of our business strategy. And we think that sustainability, it's not at all an option, it's a necessity. And we try at each step really to include this environmental criteria and social criteria. And in addition on that, it's not the topic of the day, but it's important for me to share. We try also to push all the animal welfare criteria to really have a 360 approach. But perhaps now, under your control, Robert, we can ask questions to our panelists.
Marie-Claire, please take the questions from the chat that seem most adapted for you.
Okay, so it's a very interesting question because it makes also the link with my industry. It's about supply chain and how much the supply chain is key, not only what you do inside your legal boundary, but also with the supply chain. So it's a question which is coming from Sebastian Trong. So I will read the question. Understanding and making supply chain more sustainable is an obvious way for companies to contribute to improve ocean sustainability. How do the panelists see the potential for companies to contribute to government-led ocean management processes like the expansion and strengthening of marine protected areas? Perhaps we can start by you. We can start by, I will say, what do you want to answer? My suggestion was Bruno, perhaps to start, because you were always the last one to answer, and perhaps it's interesting. And after, of course, if someone else wants to give some feedback and insight, please. Bruno?
Of course.
Bruno.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Sebastian, for that question. And I definitely see a huge potential of companies being engaged in the process of expanding the marine protected areas networks across the world. It's interesting because there's different ways of engaging depending on the companies. In Peru, for instance, there's specific fishing companies and also companies dedicated to the energy sector, like that, especially with oil, that have some oil fields in the same places where marine protected areas are to be created. Or there's fishing businesses that are in the same areas where marine protected areas have to be created. So for those specific companies, I think there has to be further engagement with these issues because they actually see a trade-off in some cases for the creation of these marine protected areas. And in some cases, from a legal perspective, it has to be with an issue of how do you create a dialogue where these pre-existing rights, these rights that the companies already have from that area, can be aligned with the marine protected areas. And there's a lot of examples of how this can be worked. But I think one of the main challenges is for already a specific interest in the area where marine protected areas are to be created, to see them not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity, based on a really open dialogue and transparent dialogue with the government. For the second level of companies that are more inclined into maybe funding these processes, I will say also, do not only see these issues as funding an initiative, but see what kind of talent do you have in your own organization and give the chance for the people in your organization to participate in this process. Because for creating a marine protected area, you need so many skills, from PR skills to business, to doing a business plan, and so many things, especially if you want to involve local communities and make a good stand for it.
Yes, Thomas?
Just on a practical level, and to supplement that, I think one needs to look at the famous scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 and 2 is what we can do as a company on our own supply chain and what we're doing. And we need to be able to do that before we can look at scope 3, because we can't really ask a lot of people to do things if we don't do it ourselves. But if we then look at what we have been involved in Ørsted, is actually two or three approaches. It is trying to articulate what it is that we believe that the supply chain can do, but it is to engage with the companies. And we have decided within certain bands that things can cost more if the supply chain is actually prepared to reach some of these goals. So we have to move away from just asking for the lowest price, because we have to move over to look at their value sheet as well as their balance sheet and so on. But the next step for us is to actually invest in them. So if some of these suppliers are having some good ideas, how do I take people from my organization and maybe put them together with one of the suppliers and have an open and transparent exchange of data and so on, so that we kind of take a joint ownership of this. But ultimately, we have to be the ones who say that if people in the supply chain do not live up to this within a 2 or 3 year period or whatever, and we also have been given our commitment, then they cannot qualify for our tender list in the future. So we have to be able to take, in a way, the pain as well, but we need to make sure that we have been part of that journey. And I think it is very tangible. And that's what makes this part of the things fun, because people can really get their hands around something and do things, and they can see them with a fairly short notice.
Thank you, Thomas. What I suggest is really to have a quick answer so we can take, I will say, more questions. The following question is coming from Patricia Mores Valenti. So, sorry, I sum up the question. An article on aquaculture's contribution to SDG is being developed by several experts in the field of aquaculture. We will probably be presented during the event 2021 FAO Global Conference on Aquaculture. So it will normally take place in the week of September 2021. So it's more a comment. I don't know if you have any reaction or any suggestion on this. And she said that the session is a nice session. So I think someone can jump to react?
Just to jump in, I believe that's a question from Priscilla, correct?
No, Patricia.
Ah, pardon. Okay, autant pour moi.
Okay. But I can take Priscilla after. Okay?
Okay.
So, Clément, do you want to jump on this?
Yes.
If you know, I take. We have so many questions, so it's not a topic.
No, of course. I guess. Thanks for sharing the information, and of course, as I shared, I believe that aquaculture has been in the past 20 or 30 years a very great driver for the sustainability of our food system. We need to remind that salmon, for instance, or trout, and many of the fish produced.
Clément, j'ai l'impression on a perdu soit vous, soit votre son.
Apologies for this. Can you?
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
That's fine.
Okay. So I resume. Maybe wanted to stress one point is aquaculture has been a very strong driver to increase the sustainability of our food system over the last 20 years. First, by preserving marine biodiversity, helping to reduce the pressure on catches, but also providing to many a source of very healthy animal protein at a very low carbon footprint. We, of course, still have a lot of challenges. We need to reduce the impact of aquaculture on the ecosystem by, for instance, developing land-based aquaculture, and we need to improve the supply chain of the feed by creating new solutions and replacing the ingredients, or at least adding new ingredients to the scope of solution we have. So I guess that's a lot of potential still to come in aquaculture, and I think that's a very important topic.
So great, and we will be connected to the event. So perhaps after we can go back to the audience in Monaco, but I take the question from Priscilla. So how can companies help lift vulnerable coastal economies, such as small-scale fishing value chains, from near invisibility? So between brackets, they are often not accounted for in developing countries' economies, without compromising local livelihoods and food sovereignty. It's a good English exercise to read it. Who want to take the questions?
Maybe Daniela would like to speak to that?
I'm happy to answer, and I actually would love to speak to this because within our own network, we have many young people that are on the ground, facing climate change and seeing this happen. And what we encourage is for companies to do a listening tour, to truly take into account the opinions, what's actually going on with people on the ground. And oftentimes we don't see that connection being made. So I guess as a very tangible thing is do an audit of how you're relating and communicating with the stakeholders on the ground, and understand how you can bring them in as a listening committee, bring them in as an advisory board, so you can hear their perspective and understand how to engage them in the process. And also going back into the transparency of the supply chain, how can we build their expectations and their needs into also the CSR strategy for the corporation. So that I'll keep it at that.
Thank you, Daniela. Do you have a question in Monaco room?
Does anyone else have a question in here?
Or do I continue for the last 5 minutes? 4 minutes now?
One more question very briefly, please. Hello.
So thank you very much. I present myself. I'm the director of the International Hydrographic Organization here in Monaco. And I would like to pose a couple of questions, very quick. One to the moderator and the second one to Ms. Fernandez and Mr. Portafaix. The first one is related to the proliferation of these initiatives in favor of the ocean. We are now into the decade of the oceans, and one of the things common to all these initiatives at international, regional, and national level is the ocean knowledge. for the moderator, do you think that these initiatives can effectively contribute to improve the ocean knowledge? Because we know that we have a big lack of effectively ocean knowledge. And the second one is related mostly to the theme of this second session, which is the relation between the ocean issues and sustainable development goals and the companies. Can these initiatives can effectively help companies working into the marine environment that's changing a lot, especially in the last decades? Thank you very much.
So if I understand well, the first question is for me, and after I think it's perhaps Adrian and Thomas, it will be interesting to have your insight. To be honest, I think it's important to organize this kind of events to raise awareness about the topic, and at the same time to be able to combine expertise, scientific approach, but also with the fact that we can share very concrete and operational best practices. Because when we organize this kind of event, and congratulations for today, I think it's a way that people understand that there is really an emergency, and they put the link. So today it's about blue economic and the ocean, but more broadly with the fact that we have less than 10 years to bend the curve link with climate change, and same things for biodiversity. It comes from the GIEC and it comes from IPBEST, and sometimes it's difficult to understand very concretely from a company's point of view or startups' point of view, and to have this kind of event where we combine also different kind of profile. So NGOs, experts, people which are coming from the financial communities, politics are for me key. And it's a starting point of course, a long journey where our target is, of course, to change the paradigm, so to be very operational. But Adrian and Thomas, I think it's important also to have your insight on this.
Sure, maybe if I start, I think on the second question relating to sustainable development goals, particularly on the ocean, and whether that will support, if I understood correctly, whether that can support the development of marine economic activity. I feel that, yes, it's definitely something that's attracting attention, making people and large corporates pay more attention to those types of activities. If you think about it, looking at natural ecosystems, primary activities such as fishing, such as aquaculture, farming are the vast majority of the direct pressures on those ecosystems, but they're also the first victims of the degradation of those ecosystems. And until this was raised more, on the top of the agenda of large corporates and others a few years back, this was a little bit a problem that they were left alone to grapple with. And I feel that now we're in a situation where by heavily emphasizing SDGs with large corporates, who are often the customers or the players just next door, downstream in the value chain, you're getting some of the bigger, very organized, very well-resourced organizations more aware of the implications of what they're doing in their upstream, in their supply chain. You're making them aware of the broader system at work in their supply chain. And by doing that, you're getting all their capabilities, all their resources. You're making them more available to come and support some of the maritime activities that they're relying on, and that so far they didn't realize that they were sort of pushing them into a bit of a dead end, if I might say.
Thank you. Do you want to add a few words?
Thomas, very briefly, of course, a company like ours, in this case, we have one SDG that is the paramount one, which is the energy transformation, because that's where we proactively can make the biggest difference. But that goes hand in hand with 14. But the way that I see it is that our task there is to try and engage in mapping the opportunities about whether it could be protected areas or whether it could be seaweed or fishing and so on. We are not the experts who would be able to say that we should do fishing or we should do seaweed, but we should be the ones who go in and are also prepared to put money into some of that scientific research. And we should be the ones who are able to map out what are some of the opportunities so that we could get people together around these things here. And then somebody takes a collective decision. So we just have to be careful that we are not asking somebody who is not the real experts to make the expert decision. Our task is to create an environment where that expert decision can be. So that's why our thumb line, our thing is that we as a company and we as the whole ocean debate here, we use the word in English that people are oceans apart. No, we need to shift that on so we all believe that we are oceans together. So we need to move from oceans apart to being oceans together.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. We have to stop. There are so many interesting questions that we can continue to read on the chat, but we have to stick to the time. So thank you again to all the participants for your great contribution, and thank you for hosting this event.
Marie-Claire, just before we go, just before we leave, we just have time for you to give us your personal wrap-up of this session and what you learned and what you think we should take away from it.
Okay, so I will go very quickly to share with you my, I will say my thoughts on it. So the first thing, we have understand that there is a kind of emergency to act. And when we think about the most important issues of our century, it's about climate change, biodiversity, and loss of resource scarcity, we can say. I think also COVID-19, so this current crisis, underlines the fact that there is no other possibility and we have to accelerate the movement. When I speak about accelerate the movement, it's at the same time to put at scale. And I think this notion was quite well taken into account during this panel session. And it's a question also of speed. So how we can really accelerate the movement in the two dimensions. So again, I will say thank you to our panelists and today's conversation. We have also understood that solutions already exist, and I'm very happy because it's something that I try to share inside my company every day, the fact that we are not speaking about recon science. We have already so many great solutions that we can implement. So now it's up to each of us to take its own part of responsibilities and to implement this kind of solution and to enter in what we call the blue economy. So thank you for your attention, and I'm sure that together we will change the paradigm.
Marie-Claire, thank you so much. Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you so much to all our panelists. It's an excellent panel. We learned a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, everyone, let me just remind you that this conference is being covered by the IISD, the International Institute for Sustainable Development. You can check it out again, if you like, on their website. The recordings of these sessions will also be available on the MBI website, as well as the traditional MBI summaries. We are counting on you to help spread the messages of what you've heard here. That is with our hashtag, don't forget it, MBI2021. Now, the MBI, of course, organized within the framework of Monaco Ocean Week. You can get the whole program on that website, monacooceanweek.org. And with that, I can tell you it's time for just a short break. Stretch your legs, get some coffee. We're going to continue with our last session today in just a few minutes' time. Let's all meet back here in just under 20 minutes for our final panel on just how to finance the blue economy. That's one you're not going to want to miss. Thanks so much to all of you. We'll see you in 20 minutes for session 3.